Selling on Amazon Europe post Brexit. It's a big topic, lots going on and lots to discuss. So in today's episode of the Brand Builder Show, I've invited on Piers Ely from AVASK. AVASK are one of the leading operators when it comes to EU compliance, expanding into Europe, and they're one of Amazon's trusted partners. So it's a privilege to have Piers on the show today to dive into these topics. So without further ado, let's jump in to this great episode. Awesome. Well, welcome to another episode of the Brand Builder Show. And today we're talking all things EU, post-Brexit Europe. What a day to be alive. And I've got my friend Piers here from AVASK, and we're going to be diving into loads of juicy topics. Piers, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you very much, Ben. Great to be a part of the show and really looking forward to going into detail on some of the recent changes that have taken place in Europe.
Definitely. It's been a bit of a crazy time, which we'll get into. Before we do that, talk to us a little bit about yourself and AVASK. What's your role within the company? And because AVASK are an Amazon partner, right? So a lot of our listeners will be Amazon sellers and probably have heard of AVASK before, because I feel like I get an email about you every single week from Amazon. What's your role in the company?
Yeah, sure. Happy to provide some context. So my name's Piers, for anyone that hasn't seen me before. I work as the business development team leader at AVASK. AVASK are an international firm of chartered accountants and indirect tax experts. So we're quite a unique company in the fact that our sole focus is centered around helping e-commerce sellers, predominantly Amazon sellers, expanding into new markets. We do that in a number of different ways. The most popular way is through our VAT compliance services. So we can assist with things like VAT registrations and VAT compliance in sort of the most traditional marketplaces, plus some others. So main markets for us are places like Europe, the US, the UAE, KSA, and also Australia. We also work with a wider network of partners that can assist in other jurisdictions as well. We do offer other services as well as VAT compliance. So we have an internal department of customs and international trade, which has been particularly popular with sellers after Brexit and the customs border being introduced between the UK and EU. But also accounting, bookkeeping, trademarks, patents, exit strategies. Our goal is really to provide sort of a one-stop shop, without meaning to sound cliche, for Amazon sellers to plug into so that all considerations are covered, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and that's probably a good place to start when it comes to the changes in Europe, because they've been significant, right? You know, I remember the days of being able to sell in Europe so easily. You know, you could just have your stock in the UK, send it to the EU, easy, piece of cake. But now everything has changed. So why don't we start there and talk about some of these changes that have been happening? What has changed for e-commerce Amazon sellers since Brexit?
Yeah, good question. To put it simply, a lot has changed.
Yeah.
It's been a whirlwind of I'd say, sort of 5 years, really, with Brexit first being announced and the referendum back in 2016. But I think it's had this snowball effect, really, since then. Obviously, you've had Brexit with the introduction of then COVID. Also, at the same time, you know, you've got European VAT regulations changing, you've got UK VAT regulations changing, and also all of the customs regulations changing as well as other things as well. It's not just sort of the high level stuff. If you go a bit deeper, you see things like product compliance and a requirement for sort of a responsible person, those sort of services also creeping into. So as you rightly mentioned, Ben, it's become a more and more complex sort of trade in terms of operating an online business. But I'd say from a tax perspective, the real change for Amazon sellers is that previously a lot of Amazon sellers used the UK as a really effective gateway into mainland Europe, and they could actually trade using Amazon in both the UK and Europe just through having a UK VAT number and a UK EORI number. Because Amazon's fulfillment option, they you know, when the hard border wasn't in place between UK and mainland Europe, Amazon was proactively moving inventory across that border. The real change for sellers that were accustomed to that is that the hard border is now in place, meaning the introduction of quotas, tariffs, and import declarations, meaning that Amazon sort of stepped back and said, no, I don't want to play any part in this transfer of stock because of all of the documentation. And quite simply, they just don't have the resources or the time to really manage that aspect of selling. So the real difference is that now, if you did want to trade in both the UK and Europe, as sort of a fundamental rule, I'd say you'd need a UK VAT number plus at least one European VAT number. You'd also need an ERI number in the UK and a separate one for mainland Europe. And last but not least, I'd say you probably want to consider whether or not you need some form of customs representation when you're shipping. It may be that your transport agent can provide it, but in some cases they don't. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, and is that something, you're talking about customs representation, is that something AVASK help with, or?
Yeah, so AVASK have an internal department of customs and international trade, which actually work very closely with my team, the VAT team. So we have a lot of sellers from outside of Europe that are expanding into Europe for the first time. And like you mentioned, if we rewind, say, 3 years, selling on Amazon in Europe was much simpler than it is now. People could effectively do their market research, identify that Europe is this amazing opportunity with uncapped potential, get a VAT number, have someone do their filings, and Amazon would take care of the rest. It is no longer that simple. There are lots of different elements that need to be considered and thought about before expanding, because the last thing you want to do is expand in a way that's non-compliant, because the authorities and the OMPs are just so vigilant now. You'd simply be shut down, or you'd be facing a quite hefty fine in some cases. So our aim as a VAT and a customs team is to collaborate and provide a bespoke solution for sellers, whereby we can help with the VAT elements of the tax, but then also the customs representation when actually importing the goods.
It's crazy, all of the changes. I'm quite surprised, to be honest, that Amazon, my prediction was Amazon would do a lot more to smooth this transition over for sellers, because they would want to make sure that the business was still there, but they really haven't. They've just kind of left it to sellers to get on with, and it's been quite a shift. But on that, has it been as significant a shift for sellers located in other countries? Obviously, it's affected us in the UK quite a bit because of the ease we had, like you said, the access. But what about US sellers, for instance? Is it anything changed for them?
I mean, it's exactly the same for US sellers, really. I'd say for anyone outside of Europe, they're now facing the same sort of regulations when entering the European marketplace. So UK and US sellers are now both deemed to be what's called a third country business, if we're talking about businesses here. So any overseas entity outside of Europe is now classed as that third country business, and would need to consider everything that we've just spoken about in terms of getting the 2 VAT numbers, the 2 ERI numbers, and also the customs representation. So what I'd say is that it's no easier for a UK seller to expand into Europe than it is for a US seller, or an Australian, or an Indian, or any seller.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, and an interesting change, because I would previously, before Brexit, recommended UK sellers the first point of expansion would be to Europe, because you've got advantages there, it's easy, whereas now that's completely different. But talk to us about some of the other, because expanding into Europe can seem like a big, daunting prospect. There'd be some myths around expanding into Europe, right? Some things that people maybe think to be true that aren't. Have you got any that you are constantly coming up against with your clients, that, things that they think about selling in EU which maybe aren't necessarily true? Give us some positive stuff. Come on.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that a lot of people, when talking about Europe, they see it as this added complexity to the business. And in some cases, they think, I don't want that complexity. I'm happy in the UK market, or I'm happy in the US market. I don't really want to scale my business into jurisdictions that I'm not comfortable in. But what I would say is that although we've had all these changes and it's become a bit harder, I'd say at the same time, the opportunity and potential of the European marketplace has been growing at the same sort of trajectory. Europe as a whole is an absolutely humongous opportunity. I mean, e-commerce turnover in total in Europe is around 700 billion last year. So when you consider that against the likes of the US, actually it's a very similar size market. And what you also benefit from in Europe is that rather than having this huge oversaturated market like the US, where there's a lot of price wars going on with lots of competition, in Europe it's a bit more sort of fragmented in the fact that you've got these different countries with slightly different characteristics and different types of purchasers, and different types of demographics, geographics. And what that means is that you can really have a much more diverse approach to selling than you can do in the US. So by having your sort of VAT numbers in multiple European countries, it allows you to not only diversify in terms of country, but you can then start to even look at diversifying in terms of marketplaces. A lot of people will begin with Amazon, but actually what you seem to find after you've sold on Amazon for some time in Europe is that actually there's other marketplaces in each country that are almost just as big as Amazon. So I'd say there's probably 20 that I can name off the top of my head that are extremely popular once someone has reached a point on Amazon where they're doing really well and they might want to look at spreading their risk a bit further, that they can also then look to plug into and benefit from having their products in front of more bodies and more eyes.
Gotcha. Okay, so like similar to like an eBay or Walmart in the US, there's other versions of those in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. So in Germany, for example, you've got Otto, you've got Real DE, you've got Zalando. In France, you've got Rakuten. I mean, these are just examples. In Netherlands, you've got bol.com. These are all huge marketplaces in their own right. And I think a lot of Amazon sellers see these marketplaces as very niche and very small. But actually, what they seem to find once they've done a bit of research is that these marketplaces are by no means small. I think in a global sense, Amazon is sort of the mothership when it comes to e-commerce, and it can be more simple to use, and people are more accustomed to using it, which is why they might choose to not go through other marketplaces. But what I'd say is that the opportunity is definitely there.
No, that's good. You're starting to convert me. I like it. You talked about the lower competition in comparison to America. Do you have any insight on that? Because that was my thought on with Brexit and all these changes, that it might stop people selling in Europe and the competition might even decrease. Is that a thing, or is that a myth itself, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. And some of the recent changes that have been brought into effect on the 1st of July in Europe have actually meant that previously in Europe, it was notoriously a marketplace that non-compliant sellers could sell in through bypassing like general rules and regulations without being pulled up on it. And quite simply, some of the rules that have been introduced have meant that can no longer take place. So I'd say, first of all, you've got these new rules that were meant to not only decrease the amount of unaccounted VAT for the authorities, but also level the playing field for a lot of people, because now these non-compliant sellers can no longer operate in Europe without having compliance in place. So it's instantly a lot of non-compliant sellers are pulling out. At the same time, you do have compliant and legitimate sellers, who they're like the legitimate sellers, they're looking at the marketplace and thinking, okay, there are all of these additional costs and complexities to running my business, which I never used to have to think about. And quite simply, a lot of sellers, they just don't want the aggro or the stress of additional complexity, and they want to keep things simple. So I have seen firsthand quite a few sellers who previously were trading in Europe and actually doing really well in Europe, just saying, I can't tolerate this any longer. These new rules and regulations have been building up over the last few years. I've reached a point now where I've had enough, and I'm going to decide to exit the European marketplace. So that gives birth to even more opportunity for those who are willing to persist and sort of bypass the new regulations that have been put in place.
Do you have sort of any recommended like thresholds that you work by, where you would say to someone, if you're doing X amount of revenue or sales in one place, it might be worth expanding into Europe, or you need to hit certain revenue in Europe to make it worthwhile? Because obviously you mentioned compliance, which comes with fees. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say there's a general threshold, and I think the reason for that is because when we advise and guide clients on their expansion path, we see so many different circumstances. And there's no one fits all solution when it comes to expansion. I think, different businesses have different models and they have different objectives. So I'd say that, typically what's quite nice about e-commerce and different marketplaces is that although each marketplace is going to be a bit different, in Europe is a prime example because each different country has its own laws, regulations, languages, paperwork, etc. But it's funny because quite frequently you see that the top categories in one marketplace are, relatable in the next marketplace. So typically when people say, for example, hypothetically looking at a UK seller that sells fitness items and fashion items in the UK market, that they might be thinking, oh, well, my goods are very desirable here. There's a lot of demand in the market for them, but I'm not too sure how the European consumer might react. What I've seen firsthand is on a lot of occasions, actually, people don't even need to grow the amount of SKUs that they're selling. They can simply continue with the categories that are most prevalent in most marketplaces and replicate the success that they've had in the marketplace before expanding.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. You talked about compliance, the need for compliance. Obviously, there's VAT compliance, but are you referring also to law changes with product compliance, packaging compliance, anything like that? Or are you more talking about the VAT side?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of break compliance up into 4 sort of subsections. I'd say that, VAT compliance is fundamental. And also now, when I say VAT, I'm also talking about OSS and IOSS because those need to be considered in certain scenarios as well. I'd also say, product compliance is a big one. I think one area of product compliance that people will be most familiar with is CE marked goods in Europe. So a CE marked product essentially shows that the product passed the European health, safety and environmental regulations. So it's sort of deemed to be a suitable product for purchase, and hopefully there won't be any issues with that product. What overseas sellers now require for CE marked goods in Europe is what's called a responsible person. So because overseas sellers are based outside of Europe, European authorities require there to be a local presence within Europe, that if trading standards did for any reason want to go and inspect the product because there'd been an issue or a problem or a situation, they could go to somewhere within Europe rather than having to track down a seller from Australia, for example, which would be very difficult. So product compliance is growing. To be completely honest, there probably is going to be more regulations introduced over the next 12 months with product compliance. I really wouldn't be surprised. So I'd say it's a growing area, and I think that is not really a bad thing because it's ensuring that the products that are on the marketplace are safe for consumption. So I think there are lots of service providers out there. AVASK work with a partner of ours who are very, we have a very long-term relationship, who help with things like storage, fulfillment, 3PL, and also product compliance in the UK and EU. So we work very closely with them, and the relationship has sort of flourished even more over the last 6 months, where this responsible person has been a requirement.
Yeah, so that's again something that you'd be able to help with, responsible person located.
Not in-house, but our partners we work very closely with and have done for a number of years. So we'd be more than happy to refer in cases where we can't help ourselves.
Yeah, great. And just to clarify on that, so you say that they would need to have like a unit of each product that you're selling on hand?
Yeah, so that they'd keep a sample of the product in let's just say, for example, in our case, in our partner's case, it would be stored in one of our partners' warehouses in the Netherlands.
You mentioned, Piers, a moment ago about OSS and IOSS. Can you just, for anybody that's listening doesn't have a clue what those terms mean, just give us a very brief description of those?
Yes. So OSS is One Stop Shop, which is an extension of the mini One Stop Shop introduced in 2015. IOSS is Import One Stop Shop. So both OSS and IOSS were introduced from the 1st of July 2021. And what it's been introduced to do is essentially to report any distant sales that either are made within Europe from one country to another, or from outside of the EU into the EU. So in this case, I think it's just worth breaking it down into sort of a couple of case studies, because whether or not a business requires registration for OSS or IOSS will depend on their model. And typically, when it comes to selling on Amazon, if you're an overseas entity, so say, for example, a UK or a US or an Australian business that sells in Europe, but only through Amazon or any other electronic interface that's deemed as an OMP, then actually you wouldn't need to register for OSS or IOSS probably. And the reason for that is because when it comes to OSS, although what you'll have through Amazon is cross-border transactions, most people are well versed with Amazon's distribution channels in the fact that they can store your inventory in one country, but a consumer in another country could purchase it. But one of the main considerations with OSS is whether or not an OMP is involved in the facilitation of the sale. So if the OMP is involved, then it's actually now the OMP's responsibility to collect and remit the VAT, and they would have to include that transaction on their own OSS return. So you've had OSS introduced to kind of streamline the process of collecting and remitting VAT, and then you've also got this additional level of OMP responsibility that's been brought in to streamline it even further. So for a lot of sellers from outside of Europe that are trading only through Amazon, it's a really good thing. And another couple of things when considering OSS for your business, you're going to have to think about things like where the products are stored, what value are the consignments, whether the OMP is responsible, and whether or not the goods are already in Europe or coming in from outside of Europe. I'd say with OSS, there is a bit of a misconception. It's probably just worth me covering, again, relating to the case that we just discussed. A lot of sellers that I've spoken to seem to believe that because they're trading through Amazon, and Amazon now has this OMP responsibility where they're collecting, remitting, and reporting through their one-stop shop return, that the seller no longer has any VAT reporting obligations. Quite simply, that isn't right. When it comes to VAT in Europe, the main trigger still remains the same, and that's if you're storing your physical inventory in a country, then you still need to have a VAT number and do domestic filings in that particular country. So if we break that down into Amazon terms, if you are storing your goods in a German fulfillment center, and Amazon is making, or you're having consumers from other countries purchasing goods from Germany, but they're traveling into other countries, then yes, those distant sales, they will go on Amazon's OSS return. However, for any sales that are made from the German fulfillment center to German customers, they would go on your domestic VAT return as normal. So the VAT requirement still remains the same, as does AVASK's responsibility to file for you. So just sort of to make that clear.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's a good overall summary. And I'm sure it's like anything, this would be something that people would need to look into a lot and seek expert advice on. But it's just good to have a bit of an overview so people know. I know when we were first told about it with some aspects of the business, I'm like, is this for real, or is this just another way to, get us to pay some more money? But it's like a legit compliance aspect. So that's good.
No, definitely. And then I'd say as well, Ben, like if anyone does have any questions over whether or not their business in particular needs to integrate OSS or IOSS, then I'm more than happy to have a conversation completely free of charge. We can do a 30-minute consultation to talk about the business model and whether or not your business might benefit from having that integrated as a solution.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, obviously we'll leave all the details of how to contact you in the show notes, etc., and come back to that at the end as well. That'd be great. Thank you for that. You're talking about, potentially in one country in Germany. Would you say that's like the best route to someone wanting to start selling in Europe that's currently, UK, America, Australia, wherever? Is the best route to set up VAT everything in one country and fulfill EFN to the others, or do you recommend going blitzing it in all of them? What's your recommended strategy?
Yeah, again, it depends on the model. I mean, to be honest, in an ideal world with Amazon, I really do believe that having the sort of spread of countries is hugely advantageous. And the reason for that is because the more countries you have a VAT registration in and Amazon storing your stock, the more countries you have Prime eligibility in. So in Europe, you've got 420 million potential consumers. Let's say, for example, you decide to launch only in Germany. Well, only 80 million of those consumers are going to be able to access your products within 24 hours. I'm very guilty of it. We live in an era where people want things very quickly. And to be honest, when I'm doing some shopping on a platform like Amazon, if I can see a very similar product available to me within 24 hours against a product that's even slightly cheaper that might take a week to get to me, it's very likely that I'm going to go for the product that gets to me quickest. So I see the real benefit of having the spread of countries with Amazon coming in the form of Prime delivery. But what sellers will also see is that their fulfillment will be a lot cheaper because the products are actually stored closer to the final consumer as well. That's not to say that that's the best approach for everyone, though. And to be honest, people run very successful EFN, as it used to be called, businesses where they can just store their stock in one country and have Amazon delivered domestically under Prime delivery, and then to other countries just as standard delivery. I'd say, if you're going to go with the EFN approach, my suggestion in most cases is to go firstly with the UK as its own separate marketplace, and then secondly with Germany. And the reason for that is because Germany and the UK combined, they have about 300 billion turnover on e-commerce platforms. So it amounts to about half of Europe's total e-commerce turnover. Germany is also very strategically located in the centre of Europe. It's got good importation options. It neighbours with 9 other European countries. It has a very high GDP and internet penetration, and also a good amount of population. So in terms of a European marketplace, as kind of like the driving force, I'd say that Germany is typically people's most popular option when it comes to the first marketplace.
Yeah, like anything, there's going to be some savings in bulk if you were to register in all of that. I know there's discounts if you register in all of them, and compliance costs will reduce per marketplace if you register in more. Is that correct, or have I got that wrong?
Yeah, definitely. So our compliance costs, just sort of to give you a quick summary, we do like a bundle for pan-EU countries, and it's more of an incentive to help people expand into multiple marketplaces at once. But say we went for one European pan-EU country, then our compliance cost would be £1,200 per annum. If you went for all 6 countries, then it would be 4,540, which equates to about £750 per country per annum. So it's about £450 per country saving if you go with all 6. And what I'd also say is that if you are going to go for all 6, then you probably need our assistance in other areas such as customs, shipping. We can also sort of facilitate FX payments. We have partners that can help with translations. And if we are doing bundle deals where we're assisting across a whole host of considerations, then we can look at doing discounted prices on other services as well.
So what is that compliance package that you mentioned there? What does that cover? That's just VAT filing, or what else does it cover?
Yeah, I mean, put simply, VAT filing. So as soon as you become VAT registered, you will need to start filing, and you'll need to keep up your filings in line with that country's legislation. Germany and France, for example, done monthly, but UK is done quarterly. So what we provide as our service is a bit different to a lot of other providers. Most providers in this space, they offer predominantly a tax software-based solution, which is all run through sort of IT software, and there's no real human interaction or physical interaction, which the consensus I get from a lot of sellers is that they can find it quite frustrating at times because tax is complex and different languages are complex, and to be honest, the documentation processes are complex. And if you're working with a tax software, it can be quite hard to dilute the information that you're receiving and really make sense of it. So what we provide, as well as having our own internal tax software for any client that comes on board, is they'll have a dedicated VAT consultant that is their point of contact for anything relating to European VAT. So by having that dedicated VAT consultant, we can provide free unlimited consultation throughout the contract. So if the client ever has any questions, they can give us a call. All of our emails, they're typically responded to within 24 hours as well. And obviously it includes all of the preparations and submissions of the VAT filings itself, plus all of the other European reporting responsibilities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And do you still do, I know at times Amazon have done different promotions about the setup, first 6 months, 12 months, that kind of thing. Is that still a thing, or does it not happen anymore?
Yeah, I mean, AVASK continue to work closely with Amazon. We have partnered with Amazon since 2013 now, and we've run regular promotions together. So you pointed out, that the most common promotion, which is the VAT services promotion. At the moment, we are on Amazon VAT Services as an approved provider. It's a very different service to our core service, in the fact that ultimately it's Amazon's VAT services, and they're just using AVASK as sort of the back end filing party. Okay. So whilst you benefit from a lower price, you don't have that same level of service, because if you do have any questions, it would have to go through the Seller Central account. It would be answered via FAQs.
That's not worth it then.
No. So
you sold me already. I'll pay any money I can to avoid that.
Yeah. Our answers are based on FAQs, and a lot of sellers sort of vent their frustrations to me about their experiences with sort of Amazon's customer services at times. And to be honest, I think the reason for that is because Amazon is a conglomerate business. It's humongous. Quite simply, that they don't have the manpower to be able to cater for every single client on a bespoke basis. So obviously they have to use technology and FAQ answers in this sort of scenario. But I'd say that those are the main differences. Is that Amazon VAT Services is a tax software based solution. AVASK core services is a consultancy-led approach to VAT filings.
You say contact Seller Central, I say where do I sign up? That's a great benefit. So anyway, moving on. No, that's good. That's good. You talked obviously about compliance, VAT, etc. What about shipping? Has that sort of changed? Obviously, Brexit has made some changes there. Can you give us a bit of a summary on that?
Yeah, definitely. So shipping's been sort of, I'd say, the biggest barrier, biggest obstacle to people sort of continuing business in Europe or starting business in Europe. To be honest, it was never looking great, considering the fact that we didn't reach a trade agreement until sort of the final hour before Brexit actually took place. So I think the agreement was made on the night before Christmas, and then the formal papers were released literally a couple of days before the 1st of January. So it gave businesses zero or little time to prepare for what a hard border meant between the UK and the EU. And to be honest, what I saw firsthand, a lot of providers within the shipping space or customs space didn't completely understand what the new requirements really meant for their business as well, which is why in January, February, you saw those, astronomical return rates from UK to Europe of 30-40% because documents were missing or documents were being filled out incorrectly. Things were being returned, things were not making it through the border. So I'd say that the first quarter, maybe second quarter as well, was a really tough time with shipping and customs into Europe. I'd say that was also heightened by the issue with shipping that was caused at the start of COVID, when consumer demand dropped off for like general retailers like Walmart and Nike. And because of that, lots of the shipping fleets put their fleets into idle, and lots of containers started getting stored around the world. And after a couple of months, people like us started getting bored of our new working arrangements and working from home and not being able to go out. And we reverted to going digital and buying things online. And that led to a big spike in consumerism online, which is why we saw that massive boom in e-commerce last year. But because the ships were in idle and the containers weren't available, basically companies didn't have the fleets available to manage the demand that was coming in. So it sort of gave the shipping companies free rein over their freight rates and container rates, which is why you saw rates going up in some cases by like 1,000%. I'm not even joking. Some sellers said that they used to be able to send a container from China to the UK or Europe for 2,000, and now it was costing 20,000. So you've got big increases in shipping costs plus changes at the customs border. I would say that things have since improved considerably. I'm seeing Germany, Netherlands as being the best options, to be honest, to ship into if you're shipping to Amazon. And our customs and trade team have services that are available to assist as the customs representative in that case. We're also working with a wider network of partners within the shipping industry that actually do the transportation of goods. So we have lots of different transport agents that we work alongside as the representatives, about 40 to 50 I think we're working with now. So if people are struggling with the concept of getting their goods into Europe, then do reach out to us and we'll be able to sort of walk you through how our service works and also put you in touch with potentially some of our partners that you can discuss transportation with.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, no, that's really good. This is really informative, Piers. I feel like I could sit here and ask you questions about this all day, but I know you're a busy man, so I just try to look towards sort of wrapping it up. But we covered a lot of compliance issues. Let's just finish just for a couple of minutes just talking about strategic issues. People that are selling maybe now in the US or the UK. Is it a case of a seller can just easily duplicate what they're doing? Well, it's Amazon here, it'll be like Amazon there. Can they just copy and paste into Europe? Like, how does it work strategically? Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the platform sort of remains intact in the fact that Seller Central, what you see is quite consistent in different marketplaces. So sellers will have to go through the same process of registering a Seller Central account. They'll have to go through the same process when it comes to setting up a new marketplace, and they'll have to go through the same process when it comes to uploading the documents that are required in those marketplaces. So actually the setup on Amazon's side is not the complex area, I believe, to expanding. I think the complexities lie in things like your compliance, your sort of launch strategy, whether or not you want to look at storage facilities outside of Amazon, like 3PL. You might want to look at like promoting your brand in Europe. So maybe you want to look at PPC advertising, promotions, social media. You might want to look at your own website. And eventually, once you've grown to a point where you believe might be right, you might even want to look at descaling your business or exiting or starting up a new project. So I don't think when entering a new marketplace, Amazon's the issue, because people who have used Amazon in one country will be familiar with the platform in others. I think it's the wider considerations that people need to think about when looking to expand.
And in terms of language barriers, multilingual listings, multilingual customer service, do you find sellers kind of stumble there, or do you have they found it particularly easy? How have you found that?
Yeah, I mean, languages is a bit of a tricky one in Europe compared to the likes of the US or the UK. Amazon will translate for you in terms of the listings, but what you might have seen, for example, in Sweden, when Amazon was doing the translation, is that some of the translations were a tad off what they should have been. You probably do, if you're expanding into new markets, you want to work with someone who understands the local language and understands what keywords are going to be effective, etc. So there are some really good companies in the market that can help optimize your listings and help with the translations. Again, we have a partner that we work with that we can introduce. So I'd be happy to make any introductions, but I'd say it is vital, really, if you want your product to be visible and to succeed, to have language that makes sense to the locals in that country.
Yeah, for sure. I think the worst mistake sellers can make is just use Google Translate, because A, it's not from a local, and B, like you said, keyword research is just so important as well.
Yeah.
And people underestimate the importance of that. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the launching a new strategy, launching a new marketplaces, sorry, I'd say that the listings and also the translations are two of the most important components. I'd also say, just on that quickly, if we've got time, just about payments as well. Quite a few sellers that I've spoken to in the past have just sort of had a standard bank account and had Amazon doing their currency conversion back to that bank account. Quite simply by using an FX provider who can facilitate platform payments through an interface. They can receive funds, they can consolidate funds under one platform, and they offer much, much lower conversion rates to the likes of Amazon. So AVASK partner with a company called OFX, which are market leading, they're a market leading FX company in the space. And we partner with them basically to give our clients access to favorable conversion rates. And that can honestly save, I'd say, up to 5% on profit margins when it comes to conversion.
Sheesh.
So
I thought it was 2 or 3%, but that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, it can be up to 5% in some cases. Wow. If you're using Amazon and sort of a standard building society account, I'd say definitely reconsider your options, or at least do some research and look into maybe a couple of rates that some of these e-money institutions can offer.
Yeah, no, great tips. Final thing, sorry, another question, but you just mentioned listings and images. It's always been the issue where if you try and add local language to an image, it changes the image across the world. Have you found any solutions to that, or do you know any more about that at all?
Not too sure personally on the listing side of things. It's an area that I don't have a great deal of expertise in.
It's fine. It just
again, we work with some companies that can help with things like troubleshooting problems, listings, marketplace diversification, optimization. So, we again, as I said, if there's something that we can't help with, our wider network of professional partners would be delighted to have an introduction, and we're more than happy to introduce on the basis that that's the best thing for the client.
No, that's good. It's just always been one of my bugbears. I remember spending the first time I ever sold a product in Europe, spending all this time getting my images translated, my infographics all translated, all edited in, and then I changed it in Italy, and all of a sudden in England my images are in Italian. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, not what the English consumer wants to see. What does that mean?
Exactly. Everyone has to learn our language.
No, definitely. Well, we're fortunate in that regard. Just quickly, if anyone is interested in using our VAT services, anyone that's listened to this episode would be happy to offer 50% off any initial registrations. And also we can include the EORI number as part of that as well. So anyone that has listened today is eligible for that. So please feel free to reach out, and I'll be happy to sort of guide you as to the process that we need to follow.
Yeah, fantastic. That was going to be my final question. How can people reach out to you to get that? We'll leave the details in the show notes, but they can contact you directly, or is there a website they can go to? What's the best option?
Yeah, best option is through our Enquiries Mailbox. So it's just inquiries@avaskgroup.com. That will come directly through to the team in general. So the BDO team in the UK, we work on an international basis. So the company together speaks over 22 languages now. So even if it's not a UK inquiry, if it is UK, you'll be speaking to probably myself. But if it's if it's another language you need assistance in, then we have people that can help too.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm sure plenty of people will do that, because that's a very, very generous offer, and we appreciate that a lot. And thank you, Piers, for coming on. I really appreciate your time, and I feel like there's so much insight there. Lots of questions I could keep asking you all day, but I know you're a busy man, so I'll let you go. But thanks so much, Piers, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Maybe we'll have to do round 2 at some point, Ben.
All the questions that get unanswered, we'll do in round 2. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Wowee, what an episode that was, diving deep into the realms of European selling. I don't know about you, but I'm inspired to push more into Europe, do some great things out there. Seems like some incredible opportunities that are really untapped right now. So make sure you do take up Piers on his offer, reach out, take them up on their generous offer of 50% off registration for VAT compliance in those different marketplaces. You can grab all of the information talked about in this episode in the show notes below the description if you're watching on YouTube. And again, as always, remember, if you do like these episodes, if you like the quality of the guests, if you want us to keep that up and keep improving on what we're doing as a podcast, please do remember to leave a review on the different podcast platforms you're listening on, or subscribe on YouTube so you get notified when the next episode goes live. We'll be back next week with another great episode where I'm sitting down with some brand builders talking about shop and how we can continue to grow in this space. It's an exciting time to be in e-commerce. Thank you for being part of the journey. Thank you for being part of the community, and I'll see you in the next episode real soon.